No, I'll catch you. Don't worry. Go for it. I'll catch you. You've got to trust me. That's why it's called a trust fall. Benedict Arnold on this episode of Bigfoot's Great American History Show. The man who would become the most notorious traitor of the glorious cause, Benedict Arnold, was born on January 14, 1741, in the colony of Connecticut. Though his family was wealthy, his childhood was far from rosy. Following the deaths of several siblings, his father began to drink heavily, and as a result, his family finances suffered. By the time Benedict was 21, both of his parents had died. In spite of all that, he began a successful business in New Haven. At age 23, he partnered with another young merchant to purchase 3 trading ships, whereupon he began a successful trading business in the West Indies. Incidentally, around this time, he was also alleged to have participated in a duel with a British captain. So it was that young Benedict displayed several traits that would define him for the rest of his life. Brilliant, often. Eager to feel slights, too often. Like so many others, Arnold's business suffered after the passage of the Stamp Act, and as a result he joined the rebel organization known as the Sons of Liberty in the fight against taxation without representation. In March of 1775 he was elected as a captain in the Connecticut militia. Always ambitious, he distinguished himself in the early stages of the American Revolution. Promoted to colonel after the battles of Lexington and Concord, he joined Ethan Allen, not the furniture company, I mean the American patriot who, along with Arnold, famously captured Fort Ticonderoga in the dead of night, while the garrison still lay sleeping in bed. Later that year, Colonel Henry Knox transported Ticonderoga's stash of cannons from upstate New York to Boston to aid in the siege. Knox's expedition took 10 weeks during the fall and winter of 75 and early 76 and covered some 300 frozen miles of pitiless terrain. His journey would come to be known as the Noble Train of Artillery, and today you can take the Henry Knox Trail to follow the route he took to accomplish his amazing feat. Meanwhile, Benedict Arnold took part in the ill-fated American invasion of Quebec. Passed over by Congress for command of the invasion, he convinced General Washington to make a second expedition to Quebec by way of Maine. His journey proved no less difficult than Knox's, but was, alas, far less successful. 300 of his 1,100 men would turn back, and hundreds more would fall sick or die. By the time he arrived, he commanded a force of only 600. During the eventual assault on Quebec City, he was shot in the leg, and 400 Americans led by Daniel Morgan were taken prisoner. Needless to say, the assault failed. Still, after maintaining a siege outside the city until April of 76, Arnold was promoted to Brigadier General. The very next year, however, he was passed over for a promotion to Major General, whereupon he offered his resignation to George Washington. Washington managed to change Arnold's mind and even convinced Congress to give the ambitious young officer that promotion to Major General. Yet while Benedict remained in Washington's confidence, he began to form an alarming number of enemies among other colonial officers. During the Saratoga campaign, General Horatio Gates removed him from field command after a heated disagreement. Arnold took to the battlefield anyway. The troops liked him and followed him, and he led them brilliantly in several attacks against the British. Unfortunately, he would sustain yet another injury during the battle. After he recovered, he joined Washington at Valley Forge, restored to his command. Alas, the Jackalope, he would soon prove unworthy of the hero's welcome he received there. In 1778, Washington placed him in charge of the military in Philadelphia. Again, his ambition created enemies, one of whom was a politician named Joseph Reed, who accused Arnold of abusing his position to profit financially. Perhaps even more foreboding, in Philadelphia he married Peggy Shippen, the daughter of a loyalist and British sympathizer. So there you have it, a portrait of a traitor, raised by an alcoholic father, twice crippled during battle yet passed over for promotions, court-martialed for profiteering, and now married to a loyalist. It would prove too much for Arnold to bear honorably. By the spring of 1779, he was in secret communication with British General Henry Clinton. In the August of the next year, he received command of the fort at West Point, which guarded the entrance to the strategically important Hudson River. Hardly a month had passed before he accepted an offer to surrender it to General Clinton for £20,000. Accordingly, he gave plans to the fort to his contact, British Major John André, who was, not coincidentally, a friend of Peggy Shippen, Arnold's loyalist wife. Unfortunately for Benedict, and thankfully for the revolutionaries, André was captured by American militiamen while in possession of said plans. The jig, as they say, was up. Arnold fled by ship to British-occupied New York City. Washington later offered to trade Major André in exchange for his erstwhile general. General Clinton refused, and in the end André was hanged, and Arnold was given a British commission as a brigadier general. Back in Britain, however, André was praised for his bravery and patriotism, while the name Benedict Arnold was never trusted again. The infamous traitor moved to England in 1781. He spent the rest of his life in exile, there, in Canada, and privateering in the West Indies. He died in London in 1801 at age 60. Tortured soul or American Judas? Both? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, this is Bigfoot saying so long, and save me a seat at your next campfire.